hope I got the hang of this. Yeah, I think I got the hang of this now. Has things popping up. I'm still using my laptop to record this. I hope it's working. I am reading out of Lydia, which is the second book, or book 2, which I wrote following on from Bliss After Life. Bliss After Life is a story about reincarnation, and it is started with the death of Bliss, who died with 95. She had a birthday party and then passed on, and the story continues with her into the afterlife, and then also with the family who was involved. So it says here something is too low FPS. I have no idea what that means. So we're now at chapter 19. We are describing Lydia's life as it is now. She's about a month old. We are in March 2012 in this story. And chapter 19, we are at the Refuge, or at the Refuge. Susan had left it to Ben to pick up Faye's parents. Lydia had been a little querulous, and Faye had decided to stay home and wait at the Refuge for their arrival. It was a lovely sunny spring day, and they took out the garden furniture and put out seats and cushions, and Anna had joined them to make it all look inviting for Faye's parents. The house was tidier than ever. Anna was amazing at keeping an eye out at everything, clearing things and keeping the kitchen tidy. She had taken over much of the running. Susan loved playing with Lydia, but was often also at David's house. They did not have many residents at the moment, and with all the visitors lately, they had kept a low profile regarding housing. It felt to Susan that the house itself could do with a rest. Over the last 20 years it had had so many people passing through. Susan had made so many friends over the years. It delighted her when she bumped into women or teenagers who had been with her when they were smaller children. I do not remember the Refuge being so devoid of refuge seekers. This house has been so busy since I started it. It feels lovely to have updated so much in the last few months. This place now feels like a residence of a large family. I think it's you, Faye, Ben, and Lydia, and you, Anna, who've made it that. It often felt transient over the years. Sometimes we were full to the brim with women and children needing a place to stay, often only for a few weeks. Last year we had Natalie, who took her own life. She was so young. Gosh, shortly after that you came, Anna. It was great to have Chris around last year, when so much seemed to have happened. By the way, how is Pete? Susan was grinning, and so was Faye, because Anna suddenly had red cheeks. You're blushing, Anna. Faye giggled. Sometimes she looked so lovely and exotic when she giggled, Susan thought. She couldn't help laughing out loud because Anna also looked like a little girl, blonde and so different to Faye. She felt so blessed. She knew that Anna was often on the phone with Pete. She had heard her laughing, and the other day he waved at her when she walked past in the kitchen. They had started to use Skype, and Pete mentioned that he would come to London at the end of March to visit his mum. She had so much more time than she had over the last 20 years now. With David on top of it all, this was like a cherry on the cake. Life was good. He is as well, you know. Anna was smiling. She did think about him a lot. He is very well, Anna said. She did think about him a lot. Knowing he would come in a couple of weeks after visiting his mum and new partner made her excited. I wanted to ask you if he could stay here. I'm sorry, but when we talked the other day, he hinted that he had 2 more weeks' time until he needs to get back to Scotland after that visit. He will be finished before long, you know, and is starting to look around for a job. Of course, Susan laughed. Had she not just said that the house felt like a family house? Pete had had some instrumental years here, and he loved the place. He was a good friend to both Ben and Tony. How funny that you and Ben are living here now and Pete is coming back to stay here with Anna. Susan was now laughing because the possibility of Pete coming here would have always been on the cards, but initially the plan had been that he and Tony shared his place in Dorset when he graduated. Well, not with me as such. He wanted to rent a room. Pay you the going rate, because he will be working. He's not even sure yet if he will look for employment within the company or start on his own. He has already done some work for friends up there in Scotland, and he's looking for a breathing space to decide. He'll be 32 this summer. He started his studies quite late, as you know. He worked for years before he decided to get into architecture. He's so clever. I love working here. It does not even really feel like a work, Susan. She smiled at Faye and Susan. They heard Lydia crying through the monitor. Faye got up. Chapter 20. A chat amongst friends, Faye and Lydia. Faye got up to feed Lydia and get her ready. Her parents would be here soon, and she felt so excited to see them. She left Anna and Susan talking. The subject of Pete had become endlessly fascinating to Anna, but she knew exactly what this felt like. Ben was endlessly fascinating to her. His parents were divorced. She liked both of them. Living with Susan now, they had both enjoyed settling in. It did not feel strange to Ben. He spent much of his childhood in his mother's home. He always knew he was loved by both his parents. His grandma, Bliss, was so interesting to Faye. The things they kept telling her about her made her so sorry never to have met her. Well, sometimes she felt as if she didn't know her, but then remembered that was all stories. Everybody seemed to like talking about her. Faye had become close to more people than ever before over the time they had come here and last year. So many knew Bliss. It seemed to Faye that she had a lot of connections all over the place, and she loved hearing the anecdotes. Her mum was the same in some way. She seemed to know everybody in their village. She was not that well travelled like Bliss was, but her uncle was in the States, and they had both visited America, and they were always interested in what Faye had to say. She had found studying not so hard. Her mum had been practicing acupuncture and all manner of herbal remedies since she was a child, and she remembered arguments with her when they were visiting her uncle together. Her mum often felt out of place there. Faye stayed on for longer and loved the whole experience in America, but her mother was very critical of it all, and found fast food horrible, and all the stuff they watched on the television. Her uncle had his feet in both camps. He had a son and a daughter who were both born in California and now managed a family restaurant. Her mum and dad both liked a quiet life. They had enjoyed the experience, and whenever she was back at home they loved hearing about the things she learned. They were close observers once Ben had arrived on the scene. They both liked him. He was keeping in touch with them, independently of Faye, and had always been interested in their ways of life. Faye knew that Ben was excited to see them. Lydia was awake, looking expectantly at her mother at the door. She had heard her mother's footsteps and was waiting to see the door open. She smiled at her mother. Such a big, bright smile, Faye thought. She never got tired seeing her daughter's eyes lighting up when she saw her. Faye never left her crying for long. In fact, no one in the house did. If she ever actually laid in her cot during the day, everybody kept their ears open for the monitor. Anna loved picking her up. She felt Lydia knew when it was her. She often felt she was obviously often the first to respond. Faye was catching up on sleep, and Ben was often working downstairs. Lydia was always happy to be cuddled, and often Anna would sit with her in her arms or walk around the kitchen or the garden talking to her in Russian. No one could hear, and she thought it could hardly matter to a little 2 weeks old what language she spoke. She sang little lullabies to her and enjoyed being with her. Faye was smiling to herself. Anna had told her all of this last night. Lydia seemed to spread the love, and Faye agreed that everybody felt they were singled out to connect with her. "I think I have a little edge on them all, my sweetie." Faye was smiling because she had spoken aloud in Chinese. Lydia immediately smiled as if she understood. Faye thought how funny. Anna should speak to her in Russian, Ben spoke to her in English, but she heard him the other day singing a song in Hindi, or what she thought might be Hindi. It seemed not to matter if she spoke out loud or in her head. Lydia often heard her anyway. She always felt she knew. However, when she spoke aloud, it felt more like it was a two-way communication. Gosh, her mum and dad often talked when alone. Her mum was often mumbling to herself, and her dad was definitely talking to his plants. He had green fingers, and the one thing he often complained about in the United States was that everything always had to look so perfect, but no one seemed to care about what it tasted like. He loved to grow vegetables and a wide variety of healing plants. Over the years, he had grown most of the herbs and plants his wife used in her practice. He had not studied to be a herbalist, but Faye thought that he was one of the most knowledgeable persons she knew where plants were concerned. Both her mum and dad had regular dinner conversations about that matter, and she thought that it must be a great bond when a couple have such passion for natural healing. She had taken Lydia out of her cot to feed her, and settled herself on the bed. Sometimes tiredness seemed to just overwhelm her, and she surrendered, as she had at least another hour before her parents were due to arrive. Okay, that's the end of chapter 21, and I shall upload this. Goodbye.